All right, so we're now going to move into the creation of the schedule. But before you can create the schedule, there's several things you need to do beforehand. Now, we call this the 7 steps, right? The 7 steps of scheduling. And so we're now going back to our project lifecycle. We are currently now on the let me get my pointer going here. So we've completed the initiate part. We're in the early stage of planning. We've kind of defined a high level what our scope is, what some of the requirements are, the dates, budget, and so on, a high level. Now we're going to jump in and focus on working the detail plan and defining the resources and then defining the schedule. Again, down here at every spot, we need to, at every step, we need to go through and do a risk and issue management, risk analysis, communicate with our sponsors at every single step. As we're creating this, we should be communicating with a sponsor, even our customers, to make sure we're both understanding the scope of the work that needs to be performed. So that's part of the communication management. We got to be doing this constantly across every phase of the life cycle. So our first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create what is called a work breakdown structure. This is going to help us estimate the activity durations. It's going to help us define the resource requirements, and it's also going to help us define cost. And again, we're going to focus on labor costs, but we can also attach material costs to each one of those steps. And all of this is going to help us create the master project schedule. And it's going to give us a budget for the entire project as well. So, 7 steps in scheduling. First step, here are the step 1 is the work breakdown structure. Step 2, we're going to do what's called a rough cut resource allocation with defining the effort and duration. And we'll spend some detail on each one of these steps. The third step is then to identify the links and the relationships between all the different activities and tasks. And then in step 4, we actually create our horizontal schedule. Then we go through the process of optimizing that schedule. Then we go through the process of identifying our critical path on that schedule. And then we're ready to go and execute and then monitor and update our schedule, step 7. And so these are the 7 steps in actually creating a schedule. I can tell you what, in today's world, what typically happens, people skip step 1, 2, 3, and go straight to step 4 and create a schedule. And while creating the schedule, they try to do the step 1, 2, and 3. Right? People skip to that. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number 1 is every piece of software, project management software out there that I know of, skips step 1, 2, and 3, and it takes you directly to step 4. So the most common piece of software out there for project management is Microsoft Project. And when you turn Microsoft Project on, it takes you automatically to the Gantt chart, which is the timeline schedule. It has the ability to do step 1, 2, and 3, but it takes you directly to that. And without proper training, people then kind of miss step 1, 2, and 3 because they're so focused on trying to create a nice picture Gantt chart, a nice waterfall, what is called as a waterfall schedule. And we miss those others. Before there was software, these are the steps that we had to follow to define to get us to the schedule. And the software does all of these things. The thing, it's out of order unless you know to go start. And there are screens that you can start with that allows you to create the work breakdown structure. There are screens to start loading your resources. There is a screen that talks about that is what they call networking. It's the network diagram that you create, which is the activity links. So you're able to do all those things. So in this class, we're going to show you that you should be following these steps, and then you can go load. If you want to load it into the system by going to step 4 and do it there, that's fine, as long as you do these other steps ahead of time. This way, you ensure of having at least 80% of all the work defined ahead of time before you start creating the schedule. So we're going to focus on step 1. So we're going to spend today and on Friday on step 1. Actually, and we're going to be as well as next week. Step 1, 2, and 3, and 4 probably makes up about 70 to 80% of all the work necessary for to plan a project. And that's where you're going to spend the majority of your work. And typically step 1, you spend a lot of time on step 1 and 2 in particular. That's where we're going to spend basically the next 2 days. So definitions of what a work breakdown structure is. Basically, a work breakdown structure is a family tree, right? If you look at it from a pictorial perspective, it's a family tree. It should have all the components listed for the entire project. And when we talk about components, we're talking about all the work that needs to be performed. And the intent is to start at a high level, and every level that we go through is we break that work down into further details. And we'll talk about what is a reasonable level to break it down to. So each level starts with the project at the very top. The next level down is a sub-project, and then the level below that could be major activities, and then below that activities, all the way down to tasks and even smaller increments, which I'll show you here in a minute. One of the key things, and interestingly enough, we had a conversation yesterday working with some folks in regards to their accounting piece. But one of the things we say is often you should be using the work breakdown structure. Defining the work is how you should be defining your, what we call the work breakdown structure codes, which equates to how you track financially the project. One of the disconnects that we see a lot, especially in companies that do project-focused work, is there's a disconnect between how a project is performed versus how it's financially tracked. And Mike knows this very well because construction is notorious for this, is the way they price and sell the job, it is not the way they actually do the work, and it becomes very difficult to compare actual cost to what was actually sold. So you're comparing apples to oranges, and it becomes very difficult. Project managers are expected to manage their projects using financial information, but when the financial information does not reflect how you build the project, it becomes very difficult to do that. And so there are disconnects with that. And this is also true of internal projects. I've seen this where companies try to financially manage internal projects the way they manage their production work. It does not work that way. Tracking a project financially is different than how you would manage a production function. And so you really need a different structure for managing that. And it, again, the financial, and when we get into the budgeting, we'll talk a lot more about this, is you should be using to financially, if you're going to use the financials to manage the project, then the financials need to reflect how the project is actually broken down and how the work is broken down. So when we look at the work breakdown structure, it definitely drives all these other areas. The work breakdown structure drives how your project should be structured, who should be on your team, right? Depending on the work that needs to be performed, should be driving who should be on your team. The work breakdown structure also drives how you should be breaking down your time estimates for the activities that are being performed. It's also going to drive the work assignments. Who's performing what work? It's also going to drive the creation of the schedule, as you're going to see. The work breakdown structure should be driving how you create the schedule, not the other way around. It's also going to help you define what resource requirements. And when we talk about resource requirements, we're talking about the skills, the people skills needed to perform the task, as well as what equipment are needed to perform the task. It is also, as you're going to see, it's also going to give you your budget, your project budget, not the budget that was given to you to say this is how much money you have to spend. This budget is a project budget that's telling you where you're going to spend that, budget, and it's also going to help you define, once you create the schedule, what is going to be the cash outflow of that project. Now, if it's facing outwards to a customer, it's also going to help you align your outflow of cash with incoming revenue, right? To make sure you're not running in the negative. And so it does both of those, but it's the work breakdown structure that gives you that. Uncertainty analysis, which is back to risk analysis, right? The risk analysis, the work breakdown structure is going to start giving you at a detail level where that potential risk, where in that work do we have the greatest risk? And then once you put that on a timeline, you're going to see when, based on the work breakdown structure, you're going to have the greatest risk on your project. Key performance indicators, and we're going to need to start talking about, and I'm not talking about whether you make money, don't make money. Key performance indicators, when we talk about a project, is you're going to look at the work breakdown structure and say, okay, you know, once we complete, let's say we're doing a design, that design is part of the work that we're doing. When design is completed, that's a key milestone, okay? That's a key performance indicator, because if the design isn't completed, you're not going to go buy materials that you're going to need. You're not going to be able to schedule the work you need to install, right? So it's going to give you the key performance indicators that are needed on the project. So the work breakdown structure is a key driver to all of these things. Without this, it is difficult to do any of these things. You're shooting in the dark. So the work breakdown structure can be visually displayed or broken down in many different ways, but it's typically a family-oriented tree. And what I mean by family-oriented tree, there is a parent-child relationship. And so if you've seen any family trees out there, you start at the top, the family start at some point, then you got their children, and then their children's children, and so on and so forth. It's basically the same thing. It helps you display the entire project as a family tree and helps you define, and a way to display the work that needs to be done on the project. Each descending level will increase in detail, regardless if we're looking at this from a product development or from a service perspective. It's also going to help you start relating elements together, both either whether it's a product development or a service side. And it's going to help you define, at a lower level, define the cost, the duration. Cost usually is equal to effort, and we'll talk about that when we get to the time piece, and duration of how long it takes to accomplish a task or an activity or a work package. So when you look at a work breakdown structure, it's going to help you ensure that you have a clear understanding or a clear definition of the work, because now you're actually start defining the work that needs to be performed. And you're also going to have a logical breakdown of the work packages that have to be created. You're also going to have at a detail level, which allows you to cost estimate at a detail level as well as time estimate. And again, it's going to expose where your greatest risks are during the work, when the work is being performed. So the hierarchy, so I'm sure you've had or have heard of organizations that have a program. So the highest level of a projectized organization is you have a program. So for example, in the old days when I was younger, the space program. Well, the space program had the Apollo program, had the space shuttle program, had all these subsets of the program. And so underneath the program, you will have projects or multiple projects. Below a project, you may have in that project multiple sub-projects. Again, let me give you an example. When I was a project manager, or when I was director of projects at Siemens, so as director of projects, I was really the head of a program. And so I had what was called the low floor program. And so all the technology related to low floor was under my program. And so under my program, I had multiple projects going on either in the US or outside the US. And so I had project managers for those. But within those, there are sub-projects. So my first projects when I started as a project manager, I had major sub-projects going on. I had the development of new propulsion system. I had the development of new structure for vehicle structures. I had new technology for braking systems. I mean, I had all these sub-projects going on. So I may have my big project, a bunch of little projects with other people. So I had other project managers running the sub-projects. And then below that, we can have activities, multiple activities. And those activities are made up by multiple tasks. Now, what I don't have on this slide, and I do show it in other places, is, and I think for the type of work that you guys do, for the most part, task is probably the lowest level you're going to get to. But we have in other organizations where they break the task down into what are called work packages. And work packages are individual work that needs to be performed that get handed to an individual and say, you're going to do these 3 things to complete this task. That's a work package. And there are times you actually need to get to that level of managing. But for the purpose of this class, task is going to be the lowest level that you need to go to. So these work breakdown structures can be broken down different ways. So at the very top, you always talk about level 1. So if you hear me talk about level 1, what's your level 1? That's the actual project. Level 2 then becomes the next level. It could be a sub-project. It could be a variety of things, but that's the next level down. And then level 3 could be all the way down to the detail level, or it could be multiple activities. The thing is, your projects can be broken down by, I can manage, I'm going to break down my work by deliverables. What are the deliverables? Or I can create a work breakdown structure based on the phases of the projects that have to be performed. Or I can break it down by the chunk of work that needs to be done. Or I can break it down by how I'm going to manage it from a project management. So you as a project manager, but more importantly, as an organization, the organization has to decide how do you want your work breakdown structure broken down? And typically an organization will have a particular, what makes sense for them. So we're going to run through an exercise. Instead of having you try to make a decision, we're going to run through an exercise that's actually going to tell you, it's going to show you, it's going to derive through that exercise what level 2 should look like for you. And then level 3 is down. So again, deliverables, we're going to identify the task to complete those deliverables. If it's a phase, we're going to look at the tasks for each one of those phases. For the chunk of work, again, what are the activities, and the same thing project management. But again, is every organization, I've seen some organizations, just every project is broken down by deliverable, some by phases, some by chunk of work. It really just depends on the type of work that you're doing. So every element in the work breakdown structure needs to have a number. And this is where people kind of go a little nuts, because these numbers are not sequential numbers. They're basically reference numbers. So we've all been conditioned to think in sequence. So when we create a work breakdown structure, we're going to try to make it fit into a sequence. You will find that as you start, that may work for a little bit, but you quickly will recognize that, oops, I forgot this, oops, I forgot that. You're not going to go back and renumber things. Use the next sequence number, the numbers, because again, once we actually start creating the schedule is where we start working on sequence. It's not going to matter. The numbers are not going to be in sequence. The numbers are there for reference only, And also, when we start creating our budget, we can then tie our work breakdown structure box to our accounting, how we're going to track the financial side of it. It has nothing to do with sequence. So, as you can see, this is my project. This is part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. This part 1's got part 1.1. This is how I relate it back to the parent-child relationship. This is the parent, this is the children. How do I know that? Because they all have a 1 in front of them. Over here, the 4s have a 4 in front. Now this one, so that's a parent-child. Well, here's a parent-child relationship. It's a 4, 4.1, so they're related to this level. Okay, this is how we're going to break down our work breakdown structure. Typically, I would say for most of what you guys in the room will do is probably 6 or 7 levels is probably the lowest you want to get to. If you're doing something very complex, large projects with its construction, it's going to go down even further. But this is the typical way graphically of how you, when you graphically look at a work breakdown structure, what it looks like. Again, a family tree. Here's a way of an example, simple, straightforward example. This is a conference, planning a conference. Here's the speakers. Here are the activities related to speakers. Right? Decide the topics, decide the speakers, arrange the speakers, brief the speakers. Venue, here are the things related. This is laid out in the phase of a project. Here are all things related to speakers, all the things to the venue, marketing the conference, and registration of the conferences. And of course, you can add a lot more than that. But this is phasing of a project. If you use Microsoft or SureTrack or one of these other Gantt chart type projects, the WBS shows up in the names as what's called either a tabular or indented work breakdown structure. So here is the top parent is planning. So under planning, gathered client requirements, that's the next level down. And as you can see, this is a 1.1, then so 1.1.1. So these are all the activities that roll up into gather client information. And under planning, the others acquire software. Underneath that, these are at the same level as these, but they don't have any children. And then step number 2 would be build the site. Here are all activities under build site. Finalize, here are all the activities under finalize. So this is how you would see it in the software. And this is that first column because then the Gantt chart gets created down at the other end. Typically, the way we have done it is we start with Post-it notes. So here's a work breakdown structure. This is for a client in the food industry. And this was to deploy, this was a deployment of statistical SPC software in this company. And so this company has 43 facilities. So this was at the high level, at the corporate level. This was going to be the standardized deployment plan across the entire organization. And then we had every plant or every location then would take their individual piece out of here and then create their own work breakdown structure and how we were going to deploy it at each facility. But this was the corporate level work breakdown structure. By the way, can't see the other ends of the wall, but there was a lot more than this. So typically when you do this, you want to start at the top and start brainstorming what is it that we need to do, which is the next level down. And then the next level below that is we then take the what and how are we going to accomplish that, right? And you just keep doing that at every level. Now we're going to walk through a slightly different method since you've never done this before. Once you create this, like I said earlier, once you create a template and you know that your projects always have level 1 or always level 1 is the project, level 2 basically are always going to be the same, then your brainstorming or defining the work just really becomes below at level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6, and that's where the differences are going to be. And that's why you start top and move down versus the bottom. Now, some key things to remember. A work breakdown structure, it is not the sequence of work. This is where I know where people are going to have challenges is people are going to start looking at this and start thinking this is the sequence of work. Don't get hung up on the sequence of work. This is about identifying all the tasks, all the activities that have to be performed on a project. Now, if you've been conditioned to think sequential, that's fine. You can try to put it, but don't get so hung up that if you miss something that, you know, rearranging is going to be overwhelming. It's not. And don't worry about the numbers. People really get hung up on the number sequencing. Don't worry about it. It's just strictly a reference, because once we get to the schedule, the numbers are not going to be related. The sequence is going to be different because we're going to be looking at the bigger picture. But it's all right when we start doing our work breakdown structure. If you feel comfortable doing it sequential, fine, do it sequential. But again, just don't get so hung up on that. Here's the other thing. Don't plan more detail than you can manage. Here's the thing you got to remember. As the project team, you have to break down the work breakdown structure to a level that the project team can manage. Then you're going to assign responsibility to several of a level 2 or a level 3. You're going to assign responsibility, a team member to be responsible to ensure that work gets completed. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing the work, but that the work gets completed. Then it becomes the responsibility of that team member to go break that work down to the level to where the work is being done, right? Don't get to the point that you get this mass of the team is trying to manage at every single level. It's going to be very difficult to do. So I always say for the team, depending on the project, level 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 is the lowest level you get, unless you're going to be down into the weeds. Okay, so be careful of breaking the work down too far down, which is, again, for the type of work for most of you in the class, you're not going to get down to the work packages. Mike, in construction, your foreman, those guys needed to get down to that level. Here's what the guys are doing. This is what they're installing. But I said for most of you in here, you're probably not going to get to that level. Now, Luke, for you, as we relate this to the software development, in the Scrum, right, as part of creating your sprints, you are breaking those things down a little bit further. And you can certainly break those down further, because once they get handed to the individuals that are doing the work, they start breaking down a little bit further to determine what work they need to be performed. But typically, we don't get down to that level when we're looking at these projects. Task duration should be linked to the review period. And what that means is anytime you have a review happen, you should create a milestone. And so if you, as you're going through and defining your work breakdown, start identifying key points that you want to convert over to a milestone. Because a milestone is how I'm going to be measuring the completion of work and performance of my work over time. So, and then there's going to be duration associated with that review point. You know, again, subdivide the project in the corresponding elements to this lowest level that you think you can manage as a team. There's no need to go down to the lowest individual level or down to a work package. Continue down to a lower, one of the guidelines is get down to a level where I actually can come up with an adequate estimate for cost or duration or estimated hours, okay? So for example, let me give you an example. So let me think of something. Okay. So Julie and Jamie, in the things that you guys do, when you look at a very high level, trying to estimate how many hours of training you're going to do is difficult to do unless you have a breakdown of what training is going to be, or what courses are going to be offered and how long those courses are. It's very difficult to say how many hours to come up. And so that's why you need to break it down. Okay, what is the training? What is the training that we're going to have? How long is that training? That's getting to a level, that level you can better define the cost. It's hard to say that I can define the cost if we're just saying we're going to do training without understanding what that means. What does that look like? How can I break the cost down? And so, again, get it down to a comfort level that allows you to control and manage the work. Here's the other thing. When you get down to the task level, only one person can be responsible for that task level. Now, again, responsible does not equate performing. Two different things, okay? Person responsible is the person who's responsible to make sure, one, they plan the work, and two, ensures the work gets completed, okay? But only one person can be responsible for that individual task. Okay? You may have someone performing it, but one person has to be responsible. You can't have two people, you can't have three, you can't have a department responsible, because when things go wrong, who are you going to hold accountable? There's no one responsible, so who are you going to hold? Yourself. So again, just remember that. And again, understand the lowest level of each branch of a work breakdown structure for what we're doing should be a task. We're not going to go below that. So here's an example. So the gentleman who's up on the board, that's the vice president of marketing for Dole Foods. So they have projects within the marketing function, and basically we're breaking down the projects that they were working internally. And so this, everyone should be involved regardless of the level, is understanding what tasks are being performed under what for the type of work for their project. And again, it's important to write the numbers. You can see their numbers: 2, 2.1, 2.2, 3.0, design testing's under 3.1, 3.1, 3.3. Again, you got to make sure you number those. Okay, we'll come back and do a quick start. What I want to do, let me stop sharing this particular screen, and I want to show you one other as an example of what it's going to look like inside Miro. So when we start doing this in Miro, it's going to look like, okay, can everybody see the screen? So here's an example of the selection of a LMS system, and that's a learning management system. So basically, you're going to have a similar breakdown. You're going to have this, by the way, this is their final, this is what it looked at the end. Getting there was a lot of stuff all over the place. But at the top, right, the project at the very top, so we're working on level 2 is what this is. And so these are all the activities related to the defining the features. These are all the activities creating the spreadsheet that helps define, so they had to come up with the requirements. The demo, defining the integration requirements, defining the user requirements, defining, so again, they're not in any sequence. This is not the sequence of the work that was performed, but these are the works saying, okay, we got to define all the features of what we want in the system, in the software. We need to create a master spreadsheet that defines the requirements. This is all those tasks. We're going to need a demo. Okay, we're going to need the integration, the hardware, and integration into other software. Defining the user requirements. What is it that the users need? And then the selection process of the software. Then there's testing, and then there's the financial portion related to it. Right? So again, there's no sequence here. It's just a definition of the work that needs to be performed in defining and selecting a piece of software. In this case, was an LMS or a learning management system. Okay, so this was at the high level the task that needed to be performed. So when we complete our first exercise, and as you complete, you're going to have a lot of post notes like this. And then we're going to talk about what goes inside each one of these post-its, because these different colors is we start putting data associated with that, which you will also do, we'll do later today, and we will continue doing that on Friday. Any questions at this point?
I have a question, Jess.
Yes.
When we've done this in the past, we've struggled with the size of the group, depending on how much involvement you want. The more people you have, the more ideas you have, but then the more convoluted it could potentially get. The less people you have, the more direct you can get to where you want to go, but then you have less buy-in. Can you speak a little bit towards that?
So in your case, it's a little different because your entire business is around projects. So typically in an organization, it's project focused, and it's a project that's facing out to the customer. That, like in your case, typically what you want to do is you want to have key representation from each function, at least the first time you do it. And so that could be anywhere from 6 to 8 people, maybe 9 people. But you also want to have a cross. I mean, different organizations do it a different way. I mean, typically what we've done with construction, the most recent, but again, it's one of those things that you start at the top. To do the top level 1 and level 2 and level 3, you probably want anywhere between 6 to 8 people, not exceed 10, cross-functional. If you're doing a internal project, what you want to do is probably you will have about the same number of people, except now you're going to have the people who may be actually doing the work, actually performing the work. And so, but we've had it in other construction companies where the folks, for example, the installation piece of the work or engineering it. So what we've done with other clients is there's a group, cross-functional, they do level 1 and 2, then they hand that off to the people that are responsible for the next level, let's say engineering and design, to do the design work. And then they go off and pull folks within design to work out the very detailed piece of it. The guys that were doing install would go to the install guys, and then they would figure out the detail level and bring it back to the larger group. And that's typically the best way, the most effective way that we've seen work, versus trying to do it all in one room. But we have some clients who have done that. And so it's part of the overall, again, we use the lean thinking. It's part of the catch-ball process of lean thinking. You do the high-level planning, you take it to the level, you hand that to the next level down, the people who are going to do the work, and let them get involved. Now, I would say for most of you in this room, or most of you in the training, you pull the guys that are going to be doing the work. The guys that are going to be managing or providing oversight or even actually performing the work. Those are the folks you need to have in the room when you do this. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. No questions? So we're going to do this. Yes, we're going to do this right now. We're going to go into the first exercise of defining the work breakdown structure on your teams. So we're going to take a quick break. It's 9 o'clock. Everyone back by 9:10. All right, and in the meantime, I will create the I have to recreate the team breakout rooms. All right. Okay, see everyone in a few. Everyone should be coming in a 3, 2, 1, 0.
So Jesse?
Yep.
Eric, he couldn't get on the board, so that's why we only have 3 participants on our board.
Yeah, I saw that it looked like he dropped out completely, and I had to readmit him and then reassign him to the class or to the room. So yeah, I didn't see that happen until afterwards. So don't worry, there'll be plenty of opportunity. Okay, looks like everyone's back. All right, just again quickly, everybody can see the screen, the Affinity brainstorming screen.
Yep.
Okay, so in summary, basically random. I know that some of you might have not had enough time, but 10 minutes usually is enough time. But again, this is just a quick start just to get us going and creating a framework for a work breakdown structure. So again, no discussions. I popped in and out. There was no discussion for the most part. In doing this, a couple of things. When you do it in person in a room, you got to be crystal clear that if you're facilitating as the project manager, you're facilitating this, there is no talking whatsoever during this, right? The only talking or only discussion should take place are any clarification in the process of doing the brainstorming, but there really should be no talking or discussion of what activities you're going to do, what tasks. None of that. It should all be done in silence. Primary reason for that is that there's a tendency when groups get together and you do brainstorming, the person that is most vocal tends to dominate the discussions, and doing it this way in silence takes away that. This is about everyone's contributions are important, and this is a way to make sure as a project manager, your responsibility when this is happening, when you're doing this, is making sure everyone is writing down notes and putting things up there. Okay.
Quick side note, this not only works for working on a project. I've got companies that we've worked with and trained with many years that they use this in 80% of their meetings. So when you're working with a group in a meeting, if you really want to get a key contribution from everybody, this is the standard way the company runs meetings and brainstorming. So that way everyone gets to contribute and there's not one person controlling the meeting. You actually get output out of the meetings.
So it's a tool that we use for everything. It's a common tool we use for all different levels, strategic level down to problem solving. And it worked very effective once people get used to. Usually this second step we're going to do is probably the most difficult step in doing this. So step 2, which is what we're about to do, is now you're going to go back to your boards, and what you're going to do is you're going to group the Post-it notes that you have on your board. But there is no talking in the grouping of the sticky notes. So again, this is extremely important. This is probably one of the most difficult things for people to do, is to do this in silence. And you will find once you do this over and over again, that it becomes easier to do. But what you're going to do is you're going to go back, and now you're going to put these Post-it notes, you're going to read them, and if you personally believe you have some commonality between two of them, put them together in a group. At the end of time, whatever the groups are, they are what they are at that point, okay? Don't worry, we'll have an opportunity to adjust things and so on. But again, the purpose of doing this in silent is to ensure that everyone has a say in the movement. And regardless, one of the other things from our perspective, it helps us to better understand the group thinking, right? If things start grouping in so one of two things I'm going to warn you not to do. Number one, everything does not go into one group. No such thing. Okay, so don't do that. Okay. Number two, everything is not a standalone either. Okay. Typically, what we recommend is anywhere when we do this is you should have an average. Try to fit them in the minimum, a minimum of 6, and not have everything as a standalone. Now, on the other hand, not everything has to go into a group. If you have some tasks that are standalone, that's fine. You don't force them to put them into a group, okay? So you can't have one group. Here's the other thing that I don't want you to do. I don't want you to group them by color. I had one smart aleck group that actually, when I said, you know, what's the commonality? In their mind, they took the common, this is a bunch of engineers, okay? Commonality were color. So they put them all by color, even though they were not related at all, okay? Make sure you read them. Make sure that they're grouped by what the content is, not by the color, okay? Everybody got that? Any questions? And again, in silence, there is no talking, okay?
Hey, Jesse, I got one question.
Yep, go ahead.
So we're like in the middle of the project. So when we did our thing of brainstorming, we kind of wrote down what's left to do.
Okay.
So we didn't put like the planning stages or anything like that.
Well, that's fine because I will, once we start the next step after we do the brainstorm, we're going to go back and see what you guys put up there. And then whatever's missing, you're going to have to add. So remember, the purpose of this exercise is to do a quick start of creating the framework. And I do mean it's the framework. It's the starting point of your work breakdown structure. You're still going to have a lot of work to do after this exercise. And then I'll explain why you want to do this exercise. And because, again, like I said, typically this is done in 40 minutes. You have a framework. Typically, if you start from ground zero, you can sit in meetings and have only 2 or 3 things identified. So this is a quick start to building your work breakdown structure. You still have a lot more work to do. So don't worry about that. That's fine if that's what you did, but it's going to get us started to start creating a work breakdown structure.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else have another question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jay,
go ahead.
I had one
Go ahead,
about duplicates.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. This is
So just group them?
just group them. This is where if they're duplicate, you group them together because eventually this is the point where we group them together because they are the same thing, right? They should be the same thing. And so this is where you start now. If you have duplicate or you have 3 copies, 4, 5, 6, because we've seen lots of them, this is when you start grouping them together.
Jess, I have a question.
Yeah, Troy.
So if I group them a certain way and the project manager doesn't agree with that grouping, and since there's no discussion, how do we do that? Go about that?
Don't worry about that. We are going to have those discussions, but this is not. So this is one of the things. This is what's different about the ground rules for this, right? When you have a brainstorming activity, that's exactly what it is. It's generating ideas. It's not judging. It's not pre-qualifying. It's the idea of brainstorming is generating ideas. We will get to reviewing what's there. We will get to that. Unfortunately, what happens in today's world, when people have brainstorming, someone throws an idea and someone immediately goes, no, we can't do that, right? That's not brainstorming, right? That's basically manipulating. And so when we talk about brainstorming is everyone gets their ideas out there. We are going to review everything, or the team's going to review everything. And then you're going to logically start looking at these, but that's during the evaluation phase. We're not in the evaluation. This is strictly brainstorming. And unfortunately, everything that we're used to, that we've been conditioned to do is brainstorm and judge all at the same time and evaluate all at the same time. That is not true brainstorming. Brainstorming is generating as many ideas as possible. What we have found in the past, the crazier the idea, the better the idea. And because sometimes those things expose a lot of different things that we hadn't really thought about. And so it's important to understand if you're doing brainstorming, there is no judging of what gets written. There is no evaluation. There's none of that. It is about, hang on for a second, my battery's starting to, my computer's going to die here. It's about It's about generating ideas, and then we worry about the judging piece. There's another piece that we're going to look at after this. Does that make sense, Joey? And I know that in the past we've always done it together. You got to separate. Brainstorming is exactly that, just brainstorming all the ideas as possible. Okay. Did you have a question, Mike? Nope. Anyone else have a question? There was someone else? All right. All right. So again, I'm going to send you back. I'm going to give you, by the way, that there is a time frame for this as well. You got 10 minutes to group them. And so group in silence. I'm going to set the timer 10 minutes. I'm going to send you back to the room, to your breakout room. And then you got 10 minutes to start this. And at the end of the 10 minutes, I'm going to pull you back out, and then we'll do step number 3. All right? You guys ready? Here we go.
Hey, Jess. I think I like the electronic version of Affinity brainstorming better than in person. It's like a little bit easier. You're muted. You're muted, Jess.
Yeah, typically, yeah, I would say because you're not all in the same room, and usually when there's people in the room, there's always stuff going on. And so, yeah, it's a lot easier to do, and it's a lot easier for people to speak up, to be honest, write down their notes. It's what we found in the last couple months when we've been using this with a few of our clients, and it's definitely.
I think it's a little easier just to visualize all the Post-its. Like when we're doing the VSM for the mill, like those got like out of hand really quickly.
Yes. Yes. The other thing, it's also easier to document, which was one of the challenges, if you remember, that we had.
Yeah.
So.
You're talking about Miro?
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, you remember.
Well, I do like the different handwriting for like that. You can kind of, it breaks it up a bit. You know what I mean? I know you're not supposed to be able to determine who wrote what, but I do think that it helps guide a little bit if you know who's actually writing down those sticky notes a little bit.
That's okay. I can see who picked what color now. So
there you
go. Okay. So we've just completed step 2. And so you can still see the screen, right? I think you're on the wrong screen. Yeah, I have you on the wrong screen now, the right screen. Here we go. Okay, so we've now completed this phase. Now we're going to move on to the next one. Anybody have any questions on this, what we just did? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is, now that we've put them in groups, going to ask each team to go back, and now you will be allowed to talk. Again, there's still a time limit. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. I'll give you 15 minutes. Yeah, 15 minutes will work. And so I'll give you 15 minutes in the room. And what you're going to do is you're going to go back and look at your groups. And now you're going to create a header for each of the groups. And you as a team need to agree what you're calling that header. Please use a verb, an action verb, right? What is that group of activities or tasks that you have there? What is that describing? Okay. Try not to do a one word. Do a couple of words of what does that group consist of? Okay. So you will be allowed to talk about it. Don't worry if some of those Post-it notes may be in the wrong group, that you may look at and say, well, this one over here where I have 6 Post-it notes, that maybe 4 out of the 6 Post-it notes really do make sense and the other 2 don't. It's okay. It's what is the majority of the post-it notes in that group, and what is that? We're going to get to the point where we're going to move stuff around, okay? But the intent, what we're trying to do here is create a framework or what our work breakdown structure might look like. Any questions? Again, 10 minutes.
And Jess,
Yep.
that header is just going to be another sticky note itself?
Yeah, it's another sticky note. So get another sticky note, different color. What I would suggest is that the text, that you would bold the text. Just go in there and click on when you're typing in the text right on top, you just click the B, bold, and just make it a bold. That way we know that's the header. Or you use a different color. I mean, again, we'll have time to clean up. This is supposed to be done when we do this in the room. It's to be done quick in the short term, really quick. And so that's what we're trying to do. All right, any other questions? All right, I'm going to send you back. And I will give you 10 minutes.
All right, what do we think, Ralph?
I don't know.
So maybe so this row here,
That's just planning, huh?
yeah, maybe planning or manager responsibility, maybe, or
I think it's the action that we're doing, right? So I guess it'd be planning or designing.
he said not one word. So
More than one word?
yeah, so maybe planning phase.
Yeah. Yep.
So planning phase. Then implement. All of these are kind of demo.
See, how do we do bold? I don't know.
Oh, I see. Here we go.
Yeah, so if you click on the post-it note, there should be a ribbon above it.
My ribbon pops up, but it doesn't give me, it just says font style.
Right next to it. Don't see it?
Nope. It just says font style, and it has italic or regular, and nothing about.
Yeah, so if you click on it.
Nothing about bolding it.
Okay. What you need to do is highlight the text. I'm sorry. Highlight the text.
That works.
Okay, and then it should pop up.
Ah, okay. Still not working for me.
Interesting.
I don't see the bold on mine.
You don't see the bold. I don't see it either, which is really unusual because it should pop up. Okay, that's fine. You're using a different color. We'll get to that. But
Just make the sticky note bigger.
Yeah, you can do that. Well, actually, what we're going to end up doing is shrinking the other ones.
Okay. Okay.
Did they change that menu? They might have changed the menu on me again.
No. That seems to be the case on everything lately. You get it just right how you want it, and then they come in and, oh, we're going to reformat just for the heck of it.
Well, we improved it, except we took
Yeah.
things off.
We improved it without telling you and
Yeah. Oh, that
didn't take
happens.
anything
This
into
guy-
your consideration.
This is a great tool. The problem is exactly that. They're constantly, especially the last 6 months, they have changed so much on it from what originally we had in here. And I got to be constantly chasing to see what changes they've made. Huh. Okay. All right. Well, we'll fix that. It's still on the shapes, but it's not on the post that I took it off. Interesting.
Needs something to poke at.
Right.
Speaking of, you're muted. Thank goodness.
What do you want me to poke at?
We were just saying these three, the
Stickies.
test onboarding and mobile app, test mobile carousels, probably actually just belong with a group of 8 stickies right above it.
Well, just leave it where it is right now.
Yep.
Don't move your groups. Just put the header on it, and we'll talk. You'll get the opportunity to move stuff around.
That's what we're saying, yeah.
All right, let's go down to the, we'll just work clockwise. So let's go down to the 3 testing down here.
Probably the same. I would just give it the same same sticky as the one above it.
Is there a reason?
Are they trying to say different things though? Because this is looking like it's just for the mobile carousel. So like,
Well,
do
so
they do
that's-
this testing before we do a beta testing?
No, that would happen at the same time, essentially, because the mobile carousels is just the feature. So mine was just more specific. The test the mobile carousel is just more specific versus the up above was just beta test in general is kind of how I'm reading that.
I guess I interpreted it like this would be the test before we launched it to the users.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, is that there would be a test here, and then there would be a beta test to the actual group of users. Like an internal test.
Internal, right?
Mhm.
There we go. So that bottom one would be the
Internal.
internal.
Yeah. So maybe that could be the name of the note.
On the right here, I'm adding some others that have come to my mind.
Yeah.
Just to kind of help out because we're a team. You're a team of 1 today, so.
Not a very good one. At least not for this project.
No. You're doing just fine. You're doing just fine. A lot of this really comes down to practice, Chewy. It's just like anything. So
Yeah.
I've done millions of these, and it still takes me practice to get them sometimes. So you just keep going at it.
All right.
Yeah, and part of my concern today was that I don't know how much, Chewy, you've been involved in the process for their ERP system.
But just the basics. I mean, I've been in the kickoff meetings. We haven't necessarily dove down deep into the selection of it. We've met with a consultant, and they just went over our day-to-day needs out there. And it's mainly been Brad on the side dealing with them and I guess vetting vendors out. So besides just being involved in like 5 hours of meetings early on, I've been kind of doing my own thing.
Okay. Yeah, and I kind of figured that. So that's why it's going to be important for Brad, because I suspect that Brad is the one that's been driving this on as a primary, that he needs to put some of this stuff up here. But, you know, it really needs to be done with the team, the people, the key individuals that are involved from the different functions, because this is going to affect everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, just do your best, get as much. Guy knows he can add stuff because, you know, we've done this in our past lives, and we've done this as part of our consulting that we do with other clients that have run an ERP system. So we know a lot of we know the pain firsthand too. So
thanks.
It's well worth it. It's just very painful to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Scary.
At times, yeah.